Welcome to Conversatio, the Belmont Abbey College podcast. This podcast aims to form and transform our community so that each of us can reflect God's image. I'm Dr. Brad Frazier. I'm the director of the MBA program at Belmont Abbey College, and with me is Dr. Dan Kling, who's assistant professor of economics and finance at Belmont Abbey College. And we're excited to talk today to you about the new FTC lawsuit that's been hitting the headlines, where the government is suing Amazon for unfair business practices. And I'm going to let Dan introduce himself, but we're glad that you're here. And Dan, I look forward to talking about this with you.
Yeah, me too. So I'm Dan Kling. It's my 5th year at the Abbey, I believe. And I teach economics and finance. And come from Missouri. Enjoying the Abbey so far. You guys have been pretty nice to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's great to have you, and it's great for us to sit down and talk about Amazon, something that's near and dear to both of us, basically, this FTC lawsuit. So, Dan, what does it mean? What is this lawsuit about?
So sort of overall, there's a few different components, but basically the FTC is alleging that Amazon, because of its size, because it's a dominant player in the market, and they're careful to point out that being a big company is not illegal. Like, that's fine. It's fine to be a dominant company, even a big company, but that they're using their size to extract extra value, to get more than their fair share, I suppose, from both their customers and from the companies that work with them. And in doing so, sort of prevent other companies from being able to compete with them fairly. So there's sort of the three prongs of it. Like, that the claim is that they're sort of hurting the consumers, hurting the sellers, and then hurting potential competition,
right,
and using their size to do that.
Yeah. But what I see with Amazon, the way that they're doing that is, the individual sellers, Amazon, they bring them to the Amazon workplace or to the marketplace. Mm-hmm. So all these small businesses. And then what I've read with talking with some interviews with different people is, well, first of all, Amazon's sales were $500 billion plus last year, almost $500 billion, which is huge. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing about this lawsuit to me is that they only have about 37% of the market share. So it's not like they have 90% of the market share. Mm-hmm. And then the third point I was wanting to talk about is the fact that, a lot of these businesses, these sellers, they are given this platform. They wouldn't have this opportunity to sell with Amazon or to sell their product as much as they have. I mean, they've got all of these customers that are just everywhere. Over 2 million small businesses, I found out, sell on Amazon. Mm-hmm. So I think where the problem, or that the government has, and I've read their complaint and I've looked at it closely, is that how they're talking about punishing those sellers. So I've read a situation where a seller lists their product that they're selling for Amazon, and they listed it for 1 penny less than they did what they were selling on Amazon. And apparently Amazon has this ability to kind of look at this. They're very data driven. Mm-hmm. And what they found was that if they put that, they'll put them in what's called a buy box suspension, which basically is like the penalty box for the sellers. And it'll put them way down on the list. Mm-hmm. It'll keep them from their product being listed when you search for Amazon. By the way, I think we're all probably Amazon Prime members, right? Or have Amazon.
Right.
I mean, they have everything that you need. But when you look at it, I don't know about you, I typically look at the first page of the different things I'm looking for, and that's about it. But anyway, back to what this buy box suspension is a practice that they do that really penalizes them for offering a lower price to another. How do you respond to that, or what do you think about that? And it's not you.
Yeah, right. Well, as the FTC, I mean, it's. There's a lot of dimensions to it, I guess I would say. I mean, I think one of the big questions, so one thing I would hold out there is, what is the counterfactual? If Amazon weren't doing this, what would be happening? Or if Amazon didn't exist, what would be happening? Right. And I think so that's something you want to look at. I think so. It's a common-ish business practice. Sometimes it's called like most favored nation policy, which is, I guess, from international trade, that if you're going to offer some other country a better deal, then you need to give us that deal. And you agree to it, right? That's sort of part of their terms of service. And it makes sense. I think Amazon's defense here is that, we want to offer our customers the best possible price. Right. And so if you're not offering our customers the best possible price, and we know that it could be better, because here, you're doing that when you sell to Walmart, or you're doing that when you sell on Etsy or wherever, Overstock, et cetera, eBay. Then that just we just could not hurt our customers by letting them pay even a penny more, right? And that's okay,
Yes,
that's
yeah.
a little might be a little overwrought, but it's also, I mean, they're in the business of trying to sell to customers, and if there's someone that's consistently undercutting them, they don't want that, right? They, if you know, oh well, obviously if you're doing electronics, you got a better deal on Best Buy.
Yeah.
You would do that, and Amazon doesn't want that at all, right? And so, so that's where the question is: well, are they? Is there something about their position that lets them be more harmful than me just saying, yeah, if you don't want to sell with me, I don't want to sell with you.
Yeah.
Are they coercive, deceptive? There's open questions about it.
Right.
But I don't think there's like a sort of by itself that this is clearly a bad thing to be doing.
Right. I think that's probably a really good point. Is that there's probably some missing pieces here. There was some whispering about Project Nessie, which is Amazon's proprietary algorithm that they use to position people on the search engine, much like Google does. They won't disclose any of that, and with the FTC, they've become clear that they're not. It's private, according to them, about how they price things and rank different people, and where you would show up. Just like that's very similar to a Google. I mean, I think Google uses a pay-to-play kind of or optimization on the web searches. But with them, trying to give the best price to their consumers, which is what Amazon is arguing.
Yeah.
Aren't all businesses though? Isn't everybody trying to squeeze the suppliers? I mean, I look at Walmart. I mean, they've been criticized for years about squeezing their suppliers. What do you think?
I think that's right. I mean, I think that there is an element of we want businesses to be efficient. We don't want them to be wasting resources. We don't want them to be doing bad things. Right. Like efficiency is not the only end here. But I think that's what they. I think that's what they do. I think it doesn't. Again, to me, it's not dispositive. It doesn't show that they're doing something harmful. My understanding of it, which granted they're not disclosing, is it almost seems like they're. So we distinguish sometimes between a monopolist and competitive markets with, are you a price maker or a price taker?
Yes.
And if you can set the price and roll with it, then that's more like a monopoly.
Right.
And whereas if it's sort of like if I'm selling corn or wheat on the market, I can price it at whatever I want. But if the market's here and I'm selling there, no one's going to buy from me.
Right.
And so to the extent that Amazon is, to the extent that they're sort of seeing, well, what prices are out there will respond with other people, where our competitors will also raise their price or keep them the same, or will we be undercut? How do we make the most money? I mean, that is the same thing that all businesses do. I think the fact that it's Amazon makes it at a scale. Yes. And it is sort of like a completeness. But yeah, I mean, the pay to play is not, so Google has advertising. Yes. The App Store has advertising. Everywhere has advertising. Right. And even at Walmart, if you want your products to be at eye level, generally you pay for that. I don't know about Walmart specifically, but paying for shelf location
in grocery stores
is 100% a thing.
Yes.
And if you want to do a demo to do free trials, that's a thing you do because you want to increase your sales and you do it. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, Amazon is just so big, and it's affected all of our lives. I think most everybody here has ordered something from Amazon, so it has certainly caught everybody's attention. But it's a good point that you make about Walmart. Talking about economic theory a little bit about the Friedman doctrine, which about that a corporation's only responsibility is to make money. What do you think about how that, for the critics or for the Amazons that were saying, hey, we're not in it to
this isn't a charity.
Yeah, it's not a charity.
Right.
Yes,
yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to that. I think it's also there's valid critiques of it, right? I think sort of basically being, instead of saying companies should worry about being good citizens, they should care about this, they should care about that. It's that companies should work to make money and return money to their shareholders. And then the shareholders, if you're the owner of a company, if you want to save the whales, you save the whales. Yeah. Don't make your company save the whales, right? And if you want to support struggling towns in the Midwest when the jobs are being shipped overseas, that's good for you. But the company shouldn't be enmeshed in that. And I think it's one of those things that there's a powerful argument for it, both in terms of what are companies good at and what is the free market economy good at, and it's good at efficiency and finding new ways to make money. Yeah. And to the extent that companies have rules they have to operate under, if we don't want companies to do X, Y, or Z, let's pass a law about it and regulate that. And that the companies shouldn't be trying to sort of second guess what's good for the world. Obviously, though, it's sort of it's not hard to open a newspaper and find examples of things that, well, maybe your pursuit of profit shouldn't have led you to do this thing that puts people in danger,
right.
or this town has been supporting you and then you move out without a moment's notice.
Yes.
And so there's valid criticisms of it. I think where it's most important is that companies shouldn't get. We don't want companies to kind of get sidetracked by the whims of who's the CEO at the time, right? Like, so if I really do care about saving the whales, and why should I drag you into that?
Right.
I mean, maybe I can convince you, but I shouldn't use my company's resources when I can just, it's kind of a way of like taking from the company to care about for what you care about when you get into the other stuff. So.
Well, I think that's all. It's really interesting. This, obviously, it has lots of moving parts, and there's a lot of things that we don't know. But in reading the complaint and things, it is certainly interesting of what the government alleges in their lawsuit, and there are a lot of eyes watching it. What about historical precedents? I think of, for example, Microsoft. That has been a similar target of this.
Yeah, I think. I mean, so in the '90s, the FTC sued Microsoft for harmful and unfair business practices, and the argument was that they were using, they had Microsoft Windows, the operating system, and then they had Microsoft Office, which was and kind of still is the dominant, between Excel and Word, like the dominant word processing, or just Office productivity software, and that they were sort of using both of them very profitable, and worked better together, frankly, right? Like, and they weren't shy about that.
Right.
You can get it on your Mac, but right. And at that time, it's sort of hard to imagine now. But Apple was in terrible condition. They just really, the '90s were a really lost decade for them. And this was pre-iPhone, pre-iPod, right? Like that's where they sort of got the momentum for them. And so it looked like, well, Microsoft is just the competitor out there. They're going to, and they're issues with Netscape and Internet Explorer and browsers and all of that. And so anyway, so the FTC was like, Microsoft was this huge monopoly, right? It really looked like they will be the dominant player in computers. And so they sued to try to split them. And the FTC won the first in the first trial. And the judge was, they were going to have to stop doing a few different things. They had to spin off the Office part of the company from Word and from Windows rather, right? The operating system. That got overturned on appeal, and then partly because the Bush DOJ was a little bit more friendly to Microsoft than the Clinton DOJ, they settled. They found a way to settle without splitting up the company. And so they didn't. And so I mean, there aren't many examples of successful lawsuits to break up companies. Even when the ones like Ma Bell, when they broke up AT&T. How many phone companies are there now? It's kind of consolidated. Some industries lend themselves to monopoly more than others, and you have network effects. But I think the other thing that really jumps out from the Microsoft case is if you'd imagined, so I don't remember when it was, but Apple had a commercial that was like from a depiction of 1984.
1984, right?
Where
they throw the hammer through the
there's this big totalitarian Microsoft controls the world, and
made a big splash.
It was huge, and it was like we're fighting in the underdogs. This Goliath here, and it's like, well, Apple, you're not doing so bad yourself, right? Fast forward 20 years, Microsoft, very successful company. But they're not, by no means, have a stranglehold on really anything other than Office. Still, pretty much. So it's fascinating in terms of whether they'll be successful and whether the outcome will lead to more or less, how the industry actually develops.
Right. Well, from a historical perspective, I think history tells us it's incredibly difficult to prove.
Uphill fight.
It's a human process, and juries are often unpredictable. So it'll be interesting to see. What do you think it'll look like for Amazon if they lose? Do you think they'll be forced to split up?
I mean, one of the remedies I've seen is splitting up their marketplace, so Amazon.com, from fulfillment, where whether they're selling it or you're selling it through Amazon, it goes to their warehouse and they ship it to you. I mean, that would be huge, right? Because I think they are integrated in a way, like over the last 5 years ago, there weren't Amazon trucks all over. And now I assume on my 10-minute drive home, I'm going to see 5 Amazon trucks.
Yes, exactly.
So they've
one will be in my driveway.
Probably, and so they've got this infrastructure built up around fulfillment. And one of the main another criticism is about the warehouses and their practices there, but they're like, that's a core part of the business and of the store part of what they do. So, I mean, it's kind of tough to imagine what it would look like if they broke that up, and so it's kind of tough to imagine that they would break it up in that way as proposed, because it's sort of like, well, where does one begin and the other one ends?
Well, I wonder about if they could do something to penalize or stop the predatory behavior about punishing if you want to sell it for a penny less. I mean, that tends to scream free markets, and I wonder if the FTC could do something. Do you think?
I think that you do tend to see, even when the FTC loses a big trial like this, like with Microsoft, they agreed, okay, we're not going to do this sort of thing. Here's something you've identified that, it may or may not. I mean, not without admitting any fault. Someone might have thought that broke the law, so we won't do that anymore, right? And sometimes it is kind of dubious, and other times it's like, that you did cross the line here. Here's it's in the penalty box yourself.
Right. Yes.
I mean that could be the case, right? And it ends up being the devil's kind of in the details of whether that actually matters, because most of the time they'll try to find a way to how can we do what we were going to do anyway. So,
well, I think the interesting thing for me, as a consumer and as a business person and working in the business school is, it's also kind of a slippery slope about as far as when is the government. Well, okay, so Amazon they're squeezing their suppliers to try to make more money. Well, then all of business is probably guilty of that.
Because their suppliers want to make more money.
Exactly.
Like they would like to charge Amazon a higher price, and thus you a higher price. And I'd rather not.
Exactly. And I'm not trying to defend or criticize one way or the other, but it is interesting when the government or in a lawsuit like this is going to say, okay, well, is Walmart worried about how they price things and how they squeeze it and things? So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think slippery slope is kind of the right way, that there's not a clear line of good business and I'm trying to get a low price for my consumers, right? I think Walmart's slogan used to be, we will not be undersold. And that's what Amazon's saying here. We won't be undersold. No one's going to match our prices on with these sellers, right? And we want that, right? We don't want them to just raise prices for at least as consumers. I think their claims, and so the question is, are they kind of increasing the gap between cost and what they get so that they're capturing an unfair piece of the pie? But again, in terms of what's an unfair piece of the pie, it's not really not really clear.
And we go back to that pay to play. I mean, because like they pay a fee to do the Amazon fulfillment, which is a huge burden, because then the seller doesn't have to worry about warehousing and inventory. They will have that. So Amazon's, in my opinion, has done a really good job about using kind of an a la carte menu about if you want these things, we can do these. And of course, it's such a data-driven organization for sure. So we've talked about what might happen to Amazon. What do you think if it was successful, the FTC lawsuit? What's going to be the impact on consumers?
Yeah, I mean, Amazon's line is higher prices.
Yes,
right. Because if you do have, there's an economic concept of double marginalization.
Yeah.
That basically, if I'm a supplier and you're Amazon or Walmart, I sell it to you, I'm trying to make a profit, and you sell it to the consumer, you're trying to make a profit.
Yeah.
And so if we split that up into, there's more middlemen, there's more people that are trying to make a profit on it. And so fulfillment would get more expensive. Arguably, Amazon would say, oh, well, since we can't pocket the marketplace, since we're not getting this fulfillment profit, we're going to charge a little bit of a higher price. So that's the argument. So that's Amazon's case, right? Is it that prices would go up?
Oh yeah.
Things would get a little
Amazon's
slower.
argument is for sure.
But maybe so the FTC's argument would be like, well, now there can be competition in the fulfillment space. Schneider or the various logistics companies might get into. FedEx might, hey, we'll offer fulfillment services for Amazon sellers now, and so plausible, right? There could be more marketplace competition, more if you can get on eBay and get Prime delivery, maybe you would do that if they were sort of a separate company. But again, unclear.
There's not trying to market a book, but there's a new book I just read, just came out, called Winner Sells All, and it's about the Amazon and Walmart rivalry that dates back from the very beginning, and they are certainly, it's a really great book. It's very interesting. But those two are going at it, and they both want a piece of that e-commerce pie. The big difference between the two is you've got one that's got stores, all over the world, and basically Amazon just has the warehouse fulfillment. So it'll be interesting to see. But then that brings into the question, the point that exactly what you just made. that's one of the scary parts of an FTC lawsuit is you don't know what's going to happen because it can deregulation of airlines. We thought that was going to, initially maybe lowered airfares, but then you have predatory, unintended consequences. So careful what you wish for sometimes with things like that.
Yeah.
Moving on I wanted to talk or get your opinion about how it's going to impact other big tech or e-commerce, Google, Facebook, Apple. What do you think? Is this going to rattle everybody's attention, or if they were to win?
I think so. I think it's getting everyone's attention regardless, because I think you have the distinction between a marketplace and a market participant, right? And so Amazon has it with the marketplace and the fulfillment and the sellers that sell alongside them. Right. Apple has it with the App Store. Walmart, again, obviously they sell things themselves that you just buy it from a supplier and then sell it on. And then they sell other things online that someone else is selling it via Walmart. And so I think anyone that's running a platform, Windows would be another example. There's lots of examples of platforms. There's been this movement, and I think Lena Khan, who's the chair of the FTC, has been vocal about it. That if you run and you can kind of understand it, right? If you run the store, then or maybe even if you run the casino, you shouldn't be gambling inside of it. Or right? If you're if you're setting the rules, then it's not fair for you to be competing against other people.
Yeah.
And there's been there've been private lawsuits about that. Epic and Steam have been in the video game space. That's been a Valve, I guess, is the company. They've been unclear still, and I guess Epic sued Apple and Google about the App Store and so forth. And so about just with that argument. But so far it hasn't really gotten purchased, but I think all the companies that have that kind of split are certainly looking over their shoulder of what can we do to make sure we're not the one that's being sued next or now, actually. There are complaints against or actions against Google, actions against Meta, Facebook.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And it's a very live issue right now.
Facebook's faced a lot of criticism over the years from the beginning. They're changing their business model.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, wrapping up, one of the last topics that I wanted, that I'm particularly passionate about, is how this relates to corporate social responsibility. About what is corporations supposed to do to give back, and the Catholic teachings about what is the common good, and stewardship. And I think those are two important parts. I'm a passionate person about corporate social responsibility. I believe that corporations that operate in an environment, they use resources that are there, whatever those resources are, and there should be some obligation to give back. When is enough?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on Amazon's corporate social responsibility? I have, if I may, I'll share, they've done some very good things, Amazon has. With food insecurity, they've opened a new homeless shelter in Seattle where their main campus is in 2020 called the Mary's Place Family Center to help homeless people. They've put $2 billion to create 20,000 homes in Arlington, Virginia, and Puget Sound, Washington, and Nashville, Tennessee, areas where they work for the homeless population. They've given a lot of money, $50 million to STEM education in 2020, Amazon's Future Engineer program that they run for getting new folks. During the COVID pandemic, they gave $4 billion to COVID-related initiatives, plus kept everybody, with their goods when we were all locked up.
Yeah.
But they did, $4 billion in COVID-related investment. 8 million laptops to distant learning students during COVID. On the other hand, there are some criticisms. There is some dark clouds about their treatment of employees and things like that. But on the surface, if you look, and that doesn't certainly count. There's not a scorecard, but they are doing something for corporate social responsibility. Where do you weigh in on that?
I think it's complex. I think there's an element of, greenwashing, like, okay, here, let's do something nice to deflect criticism from whatever it is, look over here, not at the thing you're criticizing.
Right.
And so, how much of this impacts their bottom line versus, oh, we had some extra laptops, so we sent them to some distance, right? It's unclear. But I think it's good. I think they do a lot of good things. I think even just the core business of like you were mentioning, like letting us stay inside for COVID.
Yeah.
The reason they are a valuable company is because they provide a valuable service, right? And that's in addition to the things that are sort of more conventionally charity or social responsibility. But I think all of that is important to do. I think when we sort of So sort of from the Catholic social teaching side, I think there's or thought side. I never know teaching or thought, but there's not really a lot directly on monopoly per se, on antitrust. It's
right. Yeah.
It's more of a legal distinction, I guess.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, it's that monopoly itself, size, profitability, they aren't necessarily bad or unsavory. And that you might have power from, monopoly power, pricing power from good things you did because you do such a good service, or from unjust things you've done. You sort of treated people unfairly, undercut your competitors, threatened your suppliers, whatever. There's bad things you can do, but it's more that it's not that monopoly is bad. It's just that it has a lot of power, and the possibility of doing things that aren't just, that aren't in line with social responsibility or Catholic social teaching, and that they're sort of, it warrants a little bit more scrutiny when you have a lot of market power. And so whether it's sort of internal and ethical and the board of directors and the CEO versus the government and the rules and regulations, right? That it makes sense to that's where the power is, right? That it makes sense to look there. And you look at labor things, there's all sorts of stuff to talk about there.
There is,
regardless of the specific, like, would breaking this company up be good for society or not? Yeah.
Well, it is interesting about corporate social responsibility. It is a very ticklish topic for many people in business, and that people do it for tax benefit. Would you do it if there wasn't a tax benefit?
Right.
And, but again, it is important, I think, from the Catholic teaching and from the ethical and moral standard that they should give back and to try to take care of their. Nobody's perfect, but to try to make an effort to treat people fairly and things like that. So it's going to be absolutely interesting to see how this all plays out. Again, Amazon, I think, has touched more lives of all of us, with at some point with something that we've ordered or something that we love, the truck that comes the next day when you order something.
Yeah. When you have kids, it's
very
helpful. Yeah.
Very helpful indeed. So it'll certainly be interesting to see. So I appreciate you talking about this. And it is. I don't know that we solved the problem, but there's a lot of moving parts here. It's going to be really interesting for people like us to watch and see how it turns out. So as we conclude, I want to thank everybody for joining us out in the audience today. Thanks for taking time to join us, and hope have this wonderful conversation. And if you enjoyed this episode, we hope that you will subscribe and tell your friends about Conversatio, and it's available on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. And until next time, God bless.